Oh, hey, we're live.
We are live.
I was not ready for that. I mean, usually I'm never ready for that, but I was so totally not ready for it yet. I was just like, boom, we're live. And yeah, there's things going on in the studio. And what's happening, Kevin? What's happening, wrestling fans?
What is happening, wrestling fans? It is the Two Bros Wrestling Show on St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody.
St. Patrick's Day. I don't have a cool hat like you do. I'm trying to bathe the back in green though. So
It's nice and green. It's okay. We have a St. Patrick's Day a topic. Tonight in our main event, we are going to be discussing Doug's favorite Sheamus matches. So I'm kidding.
okay, good.
Literally, he was asking, now, what are we talking about? So, I wanted to see the look of fear on his face in case he's got his signals crossed. But
I've
no,
always had
we're
my
main.
signals crossed.
That is true.
So true.
We are Mania all the time. So, our main event in 10 minutes, we're going to be talking stories that are colliding. We hear a lot about Cody Rhodes' story, but there are a lot of stories that are coming together this WrestleMania, including the one that happened behind the scenes. We're going to digest every bit of that and how it's ended up and what we think about how it's ended up. So we want to know what you think. Make sure you tune in for that. But before we get there, we got to hit that opening bell. Didn't mean to. Actually, it wasn't that loud on my end, so that's weird. Sorry about that,
like
folks.
Right at ringside.
We got good seats for tonight's show, so we're right up close. So let's begin. Now that I'm seeing the news, I'm like, I really do feel ridiculous wearing this hat. So let's begin with the latest update on the Vince McMahon sex trafficking scandal, says the man in the leprechaun hat. Blockbuster news this week, though, as 4 WWE executive names were revealed to be the 4 that in Janelle Grant's lawsuit against Vince and WWE had previously been just referred to as corporate officer number 1, corporate officer 2, 3, 4. Of course, catch everyone up. It's alleged by Grant that those executives who knew of her relationship with Vince McMahon, we now know are COO Brad Bloom, who at the time was the executive vice president of operations, Brian Nurse, who is noted in the lawsuit as a high-ranking official in WWE's legal affairs division, which makes sense because that's where Janelle Grant's was located in the legal division. Couple names you might recognize: WWE President Nick Khan, who in the lawsuit is claimed to have hired Grant on behalf of Vince, and then no less than Vince's daughter and former WWE executive herself, Stephanie McMahon. So the language in the lawsuit, of course, does refer to them by the pseudonyms Corporate Officer 1 through 4. But after this blockbuster report, the WWE was, forced to sort of address this new reveal. And of course, the statement they released is, basically doubling down that Khan and Bloom deny any knowledge of the relationship that was occurring at that time.
And is this a situation where, even though they're named, well, not named, but they have been acknowledged that this isn't necessary, this is not, they're not being sued or anything like that. They're just the officers, the people who are holding the position of these corporate officers at that time.
Correct. And in fact, I mean, there's not much said about Stephanie other than that she was aware. There's one scenario that is detailed in the lawsuit where apparently Stephanie asked this individual, the one making the allegations, to come sit close to her during a meeting that she pretty much said that she had no reason to be in. And Nick Khan doesn't come across quite as as well. While he's not necessarily accused of any wrongdoing, it was there is a allegation that at some point there was a conversation where he basically said, "Hey, you're being too obvious," kind of thing, which again he denies. So, the implication being that Vince wanted her for the job for the reasons that that she's alleging, and that Nick Khan knew this and was basically saying, "Hey, people are talking, so let's be more discreet about what is going on here." But again, to your point, they're not necessarily accused of wrongdoing; they just are named in the suit.
Gotcha.
Sadly, more to come, I am sure.
Oh, yeah.
But from one bad story to another, says the man in the leprechaun hat, let's talk murder. Daniel Rodmer, a one-time WWE wrestler who then transitioned into politics, turned himself into Las Vegas police this week after being suspected and charged of killing a man in Vegas last year. The 45-year-old Rodmer is best known to wrestling fans as a contestant on the 4th season of Tough Enough. And though he did not win, he impressed enough to be signed to a developmental deal. And he did make his WWE debut in 2007, though he would be released later that year. In recent years, he turned to politics with several failed bids for state office, most notably as a Trump-endorsed congressional candidate in Nevada in 2020. Rodmer has been charged with the murder and the death of 47-year-old Christopher Tapp. The two were involved in an altercation in a Resort World hotel room in Vegas, October 29th. Oddly, I was in Vegas on October 29th, which is kind of weird, but supposedly they were involved in an altercation.
Are you a person of interest now?
I am corporate executive number one. Tapp sustained injuries in that fight and later died. So Rodmer himself is currently out on bond. He posted $20,000 bond and is awaiting trial.
According to his Wikipedia, he went by the ring name Dan Rodman, but I don't recall this guy.
Don't ring a bell.
I do not recall this guy at all.
He shared ring with Cena and some others at the time. He was with the company like 8 or 9 months on the main brand. But yeah, I remembered him. I had to look him up too. But when I saw the face, I'm like, I remember the dude. Not necessarily as his time in the ring on this main show, but more from Tough Enough. So we've reported multiple times over the last month about the injury sustained in February by Vikingo. As expected, that injury and subsequent surgery, which I think was our last report, has had the foreseen consequence of forcing that superstar to relinquish and vacate the AAA Mega title, thus ending his 833-day reign that began in December of 2021. Quite impressive. Vikingo had suffered this knee injury last month, had surgery for a ruptured ligament and damaged meniscus on February 29th, and AAA will crown a new champion at Triple Mania on April 27th. And we already know one person in that match qualifying for the contest is Alberto El Patron.
Really?
I know who Doug is rooting for.
Okay. Okay.
No more hot, flexible wife for Miro. AEW stars Miro and CJ Perry, who in WWE were, of course, Rusev and Lana, have separated after 7 years of marriage. The news was first reported by TMZ, and then CJ later confirmed it herself on her social media, saying the couple had come to the difficult decision to end their marriage, but they remain friends. To my knowledge, Miro hasn't said anything yet. But
not that I'm aware of. And what exactly was CJ doing or is she doing in AEW?
Well, it looked like she was headed for an angle that involved a jealous husband. But considering what's going on and maybe in the real life, it does appear like that might have factored into which I don't, trust me. I think sometimes we get too excited about real life being inserted into our fictional world of professional wrestling. I am fine for them not playing up the real life separation of Miro, and hopefully they will keep to that. We shouldn't speak too soon. We put that in the universe. It could happen.
Next thing we know, Lana's with Daniel Garcia, and here comes Miro.
There we go.
There we go.
So, next news story here, and I'm wondering, are Triple H and Tony Khan like secret buddies now, or is
Yes.
WWE just trolling us?
I think they're secret buddies.
WWE continues its trend of the last few weeks of referencing AEW during its broadcast. It was, surprising, but maybe understandable when they acknowledged Sting's retirement on air, considering the stature of Sting. Even though it was strange, I guess, to hear Pat McAfee talk about how great the AEW match was. But now we just continue to go down this road in ways that doesn't make nearly as much sense as acknowledging a legend retiring, because we have Cody Rhodes this past week referencing destroying the throne back on the old AEW pay-per-view, as well as AEW's Buddy Matthews, the former Buddy Murphy in WWE, being shown on television in a photo with girlfriend Rhea Ripley in attendance at a UFC event. And, even though Matthews wasn't mentioned by name, you got then, McAfee again on commentary quipping about how he was going to figure out who Ripley's companion was. I mean, come on. And then, the video package they showed on the WWE Intercontinental Championship title history, past champions, they chose to highlight current AEW superstar Chris Jericho. I just find it very, very interesting. I like it. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I am wondering, are they trolling us?
That, and there was a debut that AEW had this week, and she had friends in a box. I don't think they actually got on TV like Britt Baker did back in the day when she was on an actual pay-per-view for WWE. But they were there.
And Britt got herself in a bit of trouble. So is this just hey, Vince McMahon is gone and we don't hold by those old rules anymore because honestly, it's dumb. I mean,
yeah, it's dumb. Yeah,
it's dumb. What's the harm in acknowledging there's another company and let's enjoy the fact that wrestling is, got this crossover. Rising tide lifts all boats, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Competition is good. Rising tide lifts all boats. It's good for everybody. It's definitely good for us.
Definitely good for us. Also good for us. Great segue. Thank you, Doug. This is what we'll end our opening bell segment on tonight. But, last year we got a little worried in Mania season about how long it was taking WWE to start announcing inductees into the Hall of Fame. In fact, last year, if you recall, if you were watching us at that time, we had to postpone our Hall of Fame show just because there were not enough inductees to talk about. Just 2 weeks before the big event, we didn't have anyone we could really talk about other than one or two. This year, WWE once again kind of got on a late start announcing their inductees, but boy, did they make up for lost time.
Absolutely.
In fact, in the last 2 weeks, it appears like we have what probably will be a full class, and that would be Paul Heyman, Bull Nakano, the U.S. Express, Thunderbolt Patterson, a rumored but not yet announced Leah Mavia, and then in the celebrity wing, Muhammad Ali. But all good news for us, all good news for wrestling fans, because next week we are going to have our annual show where we look at the careers and favorite matches and moments, as well as the merits or lack thereof of each inductee. So you'll definitely want to tune in for that as we continue on the road to WrestleMania, Doug, which leads us to the main event. We're not talking Sheamus's greatest matches, so don't.
I was hurriedly Googling things about Sheamus's greatest matches.
We didn't go with a St. Patrick's Day theme because we want to talk Mania all the time up until and through the big weekend itself. And we're starting tonight with the main event topic of when stories collide. So I guess let's start this conversation with the story that you think of when you think of Finish the Story. Though he was a multi-time world champion in the NWA, Dusty Rhodes never had that distinction in the world's largest promotion, the WWF at the time. Though once in the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, on a night back in 1977, fans in attendance briefly saw Dusty Rhodes raise that WWF world title overhead after beating superstar Billy Graham. Problem was that, Graham had been counted out, which back in that era meant the babyface would have to play dumb and momentarily forget that title cannot change hands on a count out or a disqualification. I'm glad they don't do that anymore because, that was always like how dumb can Dusty Rhodes be? He's been in the business for more than a minute here. He knows.
He's a booker, for God's sakes.
That's right. It was still, though, the closest Dusty ever came to holding the WWF title, and it planted the seeds for what WWE has turned into at this point, a pretty successful multi-year redemption story for Cody Rhodes. In fact, the finishing the story term has been used by Cody pretty much from the moment he arrived back in WWE 2 years ago. And used so often, and honestly, it's almost become a cliche. In fact, the variation of it is being used by every superstar featured in the WWE 2K video game advertisement. But, in truth, Cody's isn't the only story being told here. There are multiple stories that have been going on for years, even more, perhaps just making it, all that more interesting that they are all colliding on Mania night. So tonight we are going to discuss not predictions of what we think will happen, as we have a whole show on Mania predictions here in 2 weeks. Instead, we're going to look at the stories that are about to collide, the real life backstage drama that has become a story into itself. Doug, the first one I said I wanted to start with, it's the simple one, the one that most people think of, and that's Cody completing what his father couldn't more than 40 years ago. It's a straightforward and easy to grasp story, as he's continually been stating it plainly for 2 years. He sells it well. But Doug, do you think it's fabricated, or do you think there's truth at the heart of it?
It's wrestling, so and we get into shooty works and working shoots and things like that. But I think there's a little bit of both in this. I mean, it obviously makes for a great story. I wish it were somebody besides Cody's, but I have to say, I have very much come around to Cody during this whole like Rock ridiculousness, and I still. I think the adversity in this with injecting the Rock makes it even more complicated for the babyface to chase after it. So it's all a good story, and I think it's good for it's good. Gosh, it's good for business. I hate to do the Vince McMahon thing, but it is good for business, whether it's a work or it's a shoot. Which again, I think there's a little bit of both here. I think it's a good story.
I agree with you that there's, an element at least of truth in it. Obviously, wrestling today, though, it is bigger and more global than it's ever been in its history, especially true when you compare it to the 1970s.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm sure that reaching the pinnacle of the wrestling profession at this time is something that Cody legitimately would know that his wrestling-minded father would be very, very proud of. So I think that emotionally, there's an emotional truth there. Whether there really was an empty spot in Dusty's heart because he never achieved this one particular accomplishment in wrestling is something I'm a little more suspect of. I know in interviews, Cody has said that this storyline is as close to real as it gets, but the word close is, I think, important here because, I couldn't really find anything out there that actually verified or confirmed that Dusty truly had a photo of him holding that WWF title in the family living room. I do believe that's probably part of the fabrication to sell this story.
Yeah, I mean, wrestlers lie, just like all those Marvel actors that
What?
go, I don't know what's going on. No, I'm not in that movie. You know, wrestlers lie. It's part of the business, and whether it's true or not, I'm not sure it really matters at the end of the day because it's a really good story.
Yeah.
It's they avenge you, but like you say, the baby face has to play dumb and oh look, I won. Oh wait a minute. Nope, you didn't win. You didn't win. Dusty's a booker, I mean, you have to separate those two things. Dusty probably booked the whole thing, before he even went out there.
And it's important to point out that in 1977, Dusty Rhodes was still an NWA guy. I know it seems weird today. Maybe it won't, the way that Tony and Triple H are getting along right now. But back in the day, it was not unusual for a wrestler to go across promotional lines for a one-off, especially
Right. Yeah.
when everything wasn't on the internet, everything wasn't televised. You go take a date in New York City, make a payday, and Dusty Rhodes is a big star. We'll bring him up, bring him in. So there's no way that Dusty really thought he was winning that title when he wasn't a part of WWF at the time. Dusty obviously would also go on to hold the NWA World title 3 times, twice over Hall of Famer Harley Race, once over Hall of Famer, greatest of all time, Ric Flair. So considering those opponents and what the NWA World title meant at that time, I really do doubt that not having that WWF title was that big a deal to Dusty.
Do
But
you think this
it,
is like a when Robert Rodriguez does El Mariachi, he does the independent version first, and then later he gets the big budget version with not Robert Rodriguez, but Antonio Banderas. Is Cody's finishing the story? Is this the like big budget Antonio Banderas version of 10 pounds of gold? Is that what this is really?
I mean, you put it that way, and it certainly makes for a good narrative too, right? You could frame the story that way too, which is why it is a good story to tell,
Yeah,
because it is easy to understand this story. Wrestling fans who have been watching wrestling for more than the last few years and remember Dusty, remember a lot of this. And again, there is an emotional truth, I think, at the heart of it. And if it's not really a redemption, like, hey, I want that title because Dad never had it,
right.
there really could be a I want to redeem the Rhodes name in
Sure.
WWF, because it is, Dusty did become a full-time WWF wrestler. It was at the tail end of his prime. He had already had his prime in the National Wrestling Alliance in the 70s and 80s. But by the time Dusty became a full-time WWF wrestler, it was at the height of Vince McMahon feeling everyone had to be a character. And so that whole run did not go well for Dusty, and it gets made fun of a lot, Sapphire, the polka dots,
The polka
instead of
dots are
like,
awesome, man. Come on.
instead of doing like hard times promos and all that
Yeah.
stuff, the whole son of a plumber, like he decided to make him come out with a plunger, and it was Vince McMahon being overly obvious and cartoonish. So there I think could be a true redemption there, and that even though Dusty took lemons and made the best of it and never complained. Obviously, he had a seat at the table in NXT up until his untimely death, so he was definitely welcomed back into the company and held no hard feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But I bet that Cody, especially after what happened with Stardust and all of that to him, there has to be some element of, if it's not I'm winning the world title because Dad didn't win the world title, it's a Rhodes is going to be a serious top of the card champion in WWE. That Dad, had to eat a lot of crap back when he was here.
Speaking of eating a lot of crap, and you mentioned Stardust, Rock is what, the God King of like Titan, or is it, what's the TLC or whatever the place is called? So
God, King of
he
Titan. That's great.
he can make those like ridiculous Vince McMahon type stipulations now, right? So as Cody's boss, could he not lean into the, what, this is great, but we're going to need to see you as in the Stardust gear, I mean, just and if you don't, your contract's going to be null and void, just to lean into that.
We still have a month to go, and he's already made public, hey, I'm your boss.
Exactly
He's
so
pulling a Matthew and Nicholas Jackson on on Cody right now. That's right. Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
Dustin
yeah.
also. You had a Dusty's kid in the NWA who was well respected, and then, as some would say, a rib on the old man, not just to Dustin,
Mm-hmm.
but just to still get under Dusty's skin. We're going to paint Goldust up, and of course, Goldust made a very memorable character out of it. So again,
Yeah,
if that plan,
there's somebody else who made lemons out of lemonade.
for
Watch out,
sure.
Ruckus. Got a
Doug,
cat coming through. Watch out,
it's all
girl.
right, Ruckus. Join the conversation. Doug, you brought up Rock. Let's go there. So Cody obviously failed to quote unquote finish the story last year. Has a chance to do so again this year because he once again won the Royal Rumble. Despite this, though, he almost lost on this chance to finish the story, as WWE was ready to give us Rock versus Roman instead. Let's talk about what happened there. Obviously, you mentioned it, God King of Titan, but he's a board member, $30 million deal, a deal that reportedly included, I'm going to get this Mania opportunity against my cousin Roman Reigns. The deal was made before Royal Rumble. Doug, do you think we would have had any Cody crybabies at all if WWE took the simple approach of just putting The Rock in the Rumble and having The Rock win the Royal Rumble? Do you think there would have been an uproar at all that it was going to be Rock Roman had he won it through the way that fans are used to being primed for this?
So here's what I think. I think they did it the way they did it because they wanted a handoff. Maybe Cody knew, maybe he didn't know. There's still so much conflicting like nonsense there about who knew, who didn't know. Did Triple H know? Did Nick Khan and just The Rock know? Who knew? Or did Ari Emanuel know? Who knew, who didn't, right? But I think there was a very high level decision made of we do it this way, then we have the baby face hand off to this other baby face to go ahead and give the fans what they want. Because if he comes in at Mania or at the Royal Rumble, takes it away from Cody there, he is guaranteed to be a heel. But if Cody just hands it over to him and says, you know what, I'll finish my story later, there's somebody else who needs to take care of business first. Not anticipating that they were still going to get the same problem.
Backlash.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if they wanted Rock to headline the traditional way, they didn't even put him in the Rumble, which does make you think that even if they didn't want him to turn into Batista or someone when Daniel Bryan doesn't win. I mean, if the fans truly wanted Cody that bad, but again, it's he said, she said, right? We hear that Cody didn't know, even though there are those who did know ahead of time, and Cody was not one of those individuals. Right. It's also been reported that apparently Triple H considered an injury angle to like Cody Rhodes would have to forfeit his title opportunity. Do you think though, because it obviously whatever the plan there was, it backfired.
Oh yeah,
spectacularly backfired.
Absolutely.
WWE definitely painted themselves into a corner, and when fans turned on this idea of Rock Roman, do you think though that it worked out in WWE's favor in the long run, even if it wasn't planned? Do you think this is more interesting than what we would have been, the road we would be on right now had it been just the straight up Rock not involved or Rock in a different role?
Well, since he is the God King of Titan now, I do think that it's, it is definitely much more interesting because we've got all these layers. I mean, this is like a big WWE onion now, right? Because we've got, the wrestling, we've got the real like wrestling layers, which are, works. And then there's like, a little bit of shoot nonsense going on behind the scenes. Who knew, who didn't know, what's this deal, what's going on? And that's not, and then you can also get into the whole Nepo baby thing with Ava. Is it Ava Rain down in NXT and what she's attained?
The GM.
But I think it works for us, regardless of what the intention was. They've been able to creatively manipulate the situation in such a way where it is very interesting. And I think it will be very entertaining.
Do you think that Rock would be a face today had they never had that night on SmackDown where Cody was giving up his chance at Roman?
Yeah, I'm not sure what Rock would be doing. But yeah, I think Rock would still be a baby face, but it's just not where we went. I think he seems to be enjoying being a baby face though. I mean, I've always heard, and I think we've talked
being
about
a heel, before. You mean?
Being a heel, because everybody always loves being a heel. Apparently it's just so much fun. It's harder to work to be a baby face, but I
calling the people of Arizona cactus crackheads has to be more fun than smiling like Flex Cavana back in the day.
Flex Cavana. And that's the thing too, because Rock is kind of like this cheesy kind of like heel, like calling them like cactus crackheads and like Cody's crybabies and this nonsense. It's like it's 1987 in wrestling again.
But he has that gift for gab that what might not work for others. In the same way that what Cody gets away with that whole babyface approach is so old school, and few people I mean, as rarely as bought by crowds these days when baby faces try that. They like it with Cody.
Cody can totally get away with it. You're right. There's two very different sides of the same coin there, where there's the charisma that both of these guys have, but they were really legitimately born into this industry and have grown up in it, and maybe that's the advantage they have. But because they are working, they're making it work. And you're right with Cody, super cheesy, super over the top baby face, annoying, but we're all behind him. Even, this grumpy old Mark who, has this huge beef with the man.
Doug, before we got a book here of short stories. Before we turn to the next story in our book, let's again, predictions is not what we're doing. That's
right.
2 weeks from now. But if Cody fails for a second year in a row, is this particular story for him over?
I mean, this has been so much invested in this story. I mean, it's just like putting in, millions and millions of dollars into a Batgirl movie and then just writing it off as a tax write-off because you just don't like it. So I don't think anybody would do something like that, Kevin.
Hey, obviously they did it last year when they let him walk away, but they were telling a longer story. They almost did it this year because they were going to go Rock Roman instead. So I don't know that if it doesn't happen for Cody, that there's still not that way to reheat this in a believable fashion where the story continues for something further on down the line. I don't think he has to win at Mania for it to be the end of the story. I don't know that the story is going to end that way, one way or the other, regardless of what our predictions end up being, regardless of what happens. I do think it's possible that Cody wins somewhere down the line and still manages to keep the fan sympathy and interest beyond Mania.
I've got all kinds of ways of booking this and predictions, which we'll get into in a couple of weeks. So no spoilers from me, but I mean you're absolutely right. Once again, Cody does not have to win here, yeah,
he does not,
and still be completely over by the end of the night.
Let's talk about another story, the one that we almost got that is still in the background and is still, I think, a story that will be told, and that is the story of Rock versus Roman.
Mm-hmm.
A true dream match that fans have talked about literally for years. Cousin versus cousin, the biggest superstar of this era versus one of the biggest of all time. Roman has been champ for more than 3 years now, and every year that he's been champ, it has been rumored going into Mania season, this is the big one.
Yep.
Rock's showing up this year. That challenge is going to be there. In fact, Roman versus Rock has been rumored as a Mania main event even before this current title reign of Roman Reigns. So it's been in play for a long time, and we as fans have been eagerly anticipating it.
Absolutely.
This was the year we almost got it, and probably would have if not for the clumsy execution of it. But Doug, since it did not happen, and since Rock Roman is a dream match, we started to think would never, ever happen. And now Rock is back in the WWE sphere on a more permanent basis because of his executive position. Did WWE blow those years of anticipation by that clumsy execution and the way things went down?
I still got to go back and I'd like to think that, at least in their mind, it was not a clumsy execution. It was the best way to get things pushed through, right? Because again, you have Cody hand it off because Cody is that white bread baby face. It's like, here you go, Chief. You take this one. I'll get him later. Not a problem. And Cody officially handing it off, which they don't really even talk about now. It's like, shh, that didn't happen.
Yeah, didn't happen.
I think that was their way of getting through that. And if anything, I think they gracefully recovered instead of clumsily executing. I think it was a graceful recovery. So
do you think there still is anticipation, like they could reheat and repackage Rock Roman and make it a big deal? Because with each man getting older, especially a non-active, occasional wrestler like Rock, can they wait and tell that story next year, or does finishing the story of Rock Roman mean it would have to happen sooner?
I think it would have to happen sooner, but it can't happen sooner because, from what I understand, after Mania, Rock, goes into production on a biopic about an MMA fighter. So I think, thanks to Rock's injuries he sustained wrestling right before he shot Hercules, the whole production had to be delayed. So because of that, now actors can't wrestle during their a movie, for insurance reasons, because the whole production's delayed, just costs everybody a lot of money. So Rock is going to be away, at least from his in-ring duties, whatever those are, for months on end, which would probably push past SummerSlam. And I'm thinking, you don't want to, just a throwaway pay-per-view. And I hate to call them that, but you
No,
you don't
no.
you don't want those, you know, throwaway premium live events to waste something like Rock Roman. It's got to be at one of the big ones. And if not SummerSlam, you're looking at the fall then.
I mean, that gets to my next question, and you could say the same question for Cody finishing his story. If it were
Mm-hmm.
to happen in Saudi Arabia or SummerSlam, would it be as big a deal as it will be or could be if it were to happen in Mania instead? I just don't think so. I love baseball. Like helping win a game would be amazing. You know, 2 outs, bottom of the ninth, you want to hit that home run. But you really want to hit that home run in the seventh game of the World Series, because that's when you really finish the story at the height of heights. And that's WrestleMania. If it happens in anywhere else, even a big one like SummerSlam, it just feels a little less than if it's not a Mania main event. Rock Roman, when it happens, needs to be Mania.
Mm-hmm. And well, that's at least next year then, unless there's some really wacky booking that goes on to push something into a night too. I mean,
So every year that it hasn't happened, I
mm-hmm.
became less convinced that it ever will happen. And part of that was Roman is a semi, retired performer himself. Like, he's
Right.
only doing TV and pay-per-views, and not even every one of those. Rock is even less of a regular presence and has no anticipation to be. As you said, he's got movies to film. Will they be able, at one more year advanced, to keep something heated enough that we go there? And will it mean anything if Roman still isn't the champion? Again, not getting your predictions, but does it not only need Mania as the backdrop, does it need a title to tell that story? I don't know that it needs the title,
That's
but
what
I
I was
do
gonna
think it
say.
needs Mania.
That's what I was going to say. I don't think it needs a title, but it definitely needs one of the big pay per views. And I think the biggest, the grandest stage is Mania. And yeah, it needs Mania,
It needs Mania.
not necessarily a title, unless they're bumping heads about who is indeed the tribal chief. But
So we're talking ages, we're talking, setting, whether or not Saudi means as much as Mania, but let's talk the WWE universe, right? Fans who have wanted Rock Roman for years now, who may have become the Cody crybabies, who no, wait a minute, this is the way we wanted it. We want Cody for this one. Do you think that they will still want Rock Roman if it were to happen a year from now? Or do you think would it help to have that distance from the whole Rock as a heel, we want Cody movement?
I want to say we're really going to get to a point where we don't want to see that. But then again, I think it depends on how it's done. It depends on the story that honestly, they're trying to finish. So there was a time when you could have asked me about Roman or especially Cody, and I'll be like, yeah, no, I don't care. I don't care. I
Yeah.
don't.
But now you care. Now
I
you care.
do. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. About both of these guys, So
Well, that might answer the next question I have for you, because I was going to ask you if you thought that this year's Mania would have been stronger with a Rock Roman dream match headlining, rather than a repeat of last year's main event. Or do you think it's just as strong, or maybe even stronger, because of how they had to pivot, think on their feet, and actually, intentional or not, drew more people in?
Hey, this pivot they did actually brought me back around to Camp Cody, and I have not been in Camp Cody since he left AEW. So I mean,
So a straight up win of Cody winning the Rumble and having a repeat of last year's main event wouldn't have done it for you had it not been for what happened with.
I would have stood and applauded, when Roman got the 1, 2, 3 on Cody again, and loved it. Now I'm like, you know,
Finish the story.
finish the story, man. Finish the story. I mean, yes, finish the story.
That's really telling that, it doesn't feel like a rerun
Mm-hmm.
because of all the added elements that they have put in with The Rock's involvement. Again, intentional or not, I do think it kind of revived the Cody story for not just you, who was uninterested,
Yeah.
but I mean, the fan reactions show that there was a true, overwhelming sympathy to the real world events
Mm-hmm.
happening that have, of course, been spun into the fictional on screen presentation.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Bloodline story, which is another story that is being told. I don't think that story is about to be finished because we're not getting cousin versus cousin here, but we are getting brother versus brother.
Mm-hmm.
You can make the argument that this is the oldest story of the bunch. The idea of the bloodline and who is the head of the table can be traced back 64 years to when High Chief Peter Maivia was the first in a long line of men and women entering the wrestling business from that particular family. The word is fa'amatia. Fa'amatia. That's the Samoan word that describes the system around which their entire culture is organized. The tribal chief bit is not just a gimmick, but an extension of Fa'amatia, where families have a member that hold this chief title, and whoever is the chief is given the responsibility for the welfare of others, including the entire extended family. These family chiefs are also required in Samoan politics. So the island's royal families have also had to acknowledge a leader from that family in order for that person to legitimately rule. So whether family or country, these tribal chiefs only have their power because every other member of the family acknowledges them
Mm-hmm.
and gives it to them. Which is why Roman needed Rock to say it.
Yeah.
I have to say, I was a bit surprised, Doug, that they had The Rock do the acknowledgement bit at this point when they could save that. Were you?
Well, they're I think they're trying to establish, because they did have to pivot. Clearly, they had to pivot, and I think there's going to always be that. Well, it's Rock, it's Hill Rock. Is he going to turn? Is it, is the ego going to get in the way? What's going to happen here? So they're kind of just pushing that to the side and showing, like, I think they're drawing a line in the sand and saying, no, this is a unified front. This is a unified bloodline. Rock acknowledges, the accomplishments of, you know the tribal chief. This is where we're going with this. This is a tight unit, no questions here. We can sow those seeds of doubt, still, but I think it dispels them for now, and I think that was needed right now.
You do start to see the cracks in the facade, though. When Rock goes on and
Mm-hmm.
he's doing his catchphrases and he's being over the top and he's making it about him, you can see a look
Uh-huh.
on Roman's face
Yes.
of like someone stealing the show. He's acknowledged that I'm the chief and the head of the table here, but
But
he's not
yeah.
acting like it, which
Mm-hmm.
is where this is likely going. But with Jimmy versus Jay, they keep that bloodline drama playing out. And because the family's chief is responsible for the extended family, this Mania match still has Roman's shadow
Mm-hmm.
cast directly over top of it. Doug, we've seen the Usos fighting before, either as Roman's, either for Roman's approval or to challenge Roman to step up. With Rock a special attraction, I think we definitely are going to get that turn at some point. You said that, with the movie schedule he has, it's probably going to have to be later rather than sooner. But do you think the real story being told here as to who actually takes the tribal chief role away, is that real story of who is at the head of the table and Uso ultimately taking that from Roman? And is this Jimmy versus Jay undercard match really the seed planting for the ultimate end of the bloodline story.
That is very interesting and something I hadn't considered. I almost see the bloodline going on and going on and going on. I mean, I could book, for years out at this point with the bloodline because, again, I don't want to get into too spoilery territory, but there are some
Yeah.
free agents. There's Samoan free agents out there right now. Rikishi
And
has
I don't want to
other
get,
kids. So
it's true. And
I mean,
some really talented ones too that are just
exactly,
waiting.
exactly. So
You're right. There's other layers that you can start building in to continue this story. But I do think that something's going to come out of Jimmy J that is going to be whatever that next chapter of this story is. Because, and again, I know we're not doing predictions, but had it been
right.
Rock versus Roman, I would be predicting. I can do this since this is not a match that's happening. I would be predicting Roman only because we know Rock will go back to Hollywood and he's not a full-time
Yes.
wrestler.
That
So,
that exactly, because I could see not only Rock, Roman defeating Rock, but Roman destroying Rock to where he's, there's almost like an injury angle or whatever, where he's just beaten so bad he just tucks his tail, runs away from WWE and goes to heel in Hollywood or whatever. Absolutely.
so ultimately, whoever takes that from Roman is, be it Jay or Jimmy or Solo or someone we've not yet
Right.
seen. Does it need to be someone other than Rock, a younger passing of the torch, the old lion being taken down by the young lion, and the pride falls in line behind him? Is that one of the
It
older stories that has ever been told being told here?
it absolutely has to be that way, or just wrestling logic. You have to make your new stars, and it has to be somebody young, somebody new, not necessarily new, but somebody who has earned it. And now I'm thinking about Cody's story. Cody didn't finish his story last year because Cody hadn't done that babyface like hero's journey yet, right? He hadn't accomplished the things he needed to accomplish, like defeating Brock Lesnar, going up against these adversities, like the what is the not the seven deadly sins, but the Herculean deeds he has to do to get to where he is, just overcoming adversity over adversity. And now that I'm thinking about it, main event Jay Uso has, done these things. He's finally broken free from the bloodline, out of Roman's shadow, away from his brother, making his own decisions for probably the first time in his life, from even when he was still in the womb, So until just now, I hadn't really thought about it, but this does pave the road for Jay. My goodness,
I
it paves
mean,
the road for Jay.
those Usos are going to be there when Rock's
Wow.
filming his movie.
Absolutely. And, again, there are Samoan free agents that aren't Samoa Joe, but that's okay. Joe's the only Samoan on that island that's not related to them somehow.
You talk about accomplishments, Doug. You once again have teed me up to what I want to mention, maybe as the last story that I think actually supersedes all the others, and that is the Roman Reigns story. Again, I'm not making predictions here, just a statement of fact. Whether or not Roman's world title story ends at Mania or continues beyond Mania, we have witnessed something not seen since the era that Cody's dad held up that title over his head. Roman will go down in history for this particular title reign whenever it ends at this point. Is this a new precedent, Doug? A return to that pre-80s days of wrestling? Or is Roman just an aberration and we'll go back to more modern wrestling title reigns?
I think this is a new precedent because, I mean, Gunther's held his belt
It's
for a
true.
while. I don't
And we
even
just
know.
talked AAA, and Vikingo will, had
Yeah,
it for 3+ years, the Mega Championship down in Mexico. So maybe everything that's old is new again, and they realize
maybe.
there's value in these, building up these unbeatable champions that make
Hmm.
superstars down the road.
I mean, because it does really say something for the next guy to come along. Just like when you beat Lesnar, that's a big deal. That's a check off on the box, or or beating Taker at WrestleMania. Another check for you. Sometimes the person who did it didn't need it, but
I mean, so whether we're talking, Cody finishing that straight story of redemption and winning the big one, or
right.
Rock taking the tribal chief role from his cousin in the dream match that people have waited forever to see, or whether it's the, one other member of the family to come up and finally end this whole bloodline thing by putting the old dog out to pasture when it's time.
Right.
The real superseding story here is that this is all going to be a big deal because the Roman Reigns finishing of the story, whenever it finishes, is reestablishing that unbeatable champion when you had guys that would rule for years,
Right.
and it made it that much more important.
Right. Because I think there's definitely a great story to tell with Roman at some point in the future where there is a redemption arc where, the villain becomes the hero again. He atones for his past and makes up for it. And, it'll be a great arc eventually. Just don't know if
Eventually,
it's time yet. But we'll get into that in a few weeks.
what stories get completed at Mania, which ones get to continue, we will know in just 3 weeks' time, and we'll be talking a whole lot more about it as we get closer. That is our main event topic for tonight. Doug, let's hit that big finish and take the people home.
Let's do it. Let's take them home. What are we doing?
Botch of the week.
Botch of the week. So here's the thing, man. I'm going to keep us in bloodline territory here because I really like what's going on in the WWE right now. And it's, as a wrestling fan, it's been hard to say that at times in the past, but I really do like what's going on in the WWE right now. However, it rocks promos on X, not the ones he's doing on air, not the ones, that hit the airwaves for everybody to see, but the non-PG stuff. While entertaining, and I have no problems with it, I'm not offended by the language at all. I have to say it's a botch going out to The Rock specifically because, again, as I mentioned earlier, he is the God King of Titan, and he should set the bar, not like Sheamus and Cesaro, but set the bar for the rest of the company. And when your company puts out something that says, you must maintain your the PG-13 rating across all platforms, and then you holding this high position, just thumb your nose at that. It come on, do better.
I mean, I'm not going to argue with you on that one. My botch of the week, I think, is one that very few people can argue with either, though bookers seem to be bucking this trend. And I never thought I'd be giving a botch to Candice LeRae. But
yeah,
bringing up Maxine's dead brother, can we just please stop exploiting the real life deaths of wrestlers' families? Christian took to social media and basically, joked around about, hey, stealing my gimmick kind of thing. But I know they had to sign off. I know all parties probably said, sure, we're fine with it. But Maxine's brother in real life died about 6-7 years ago in a rideshare car accident. He had a particular condition that by suffering the injuries of the accident led to his death. Like his dude was in his early 20s. So, one, it's tragic. It's still fresh enough. I would think it doesn't need to be brought up in front of a young woman who honestly is having a bit of a hard time now. I mean, even the part about like, hey, the fans have turned against you is based on real life heckling and things that are happening at live events, because she's as green as grass and she's a model in this world, not a wrestler. And that's not her fault. And, okay, let's talk about the fact she's not very good in the ring. That's maybe fair game, especially for fans who want to, boo just the idea of like, she's not ready, but to turn it into a, hey, your brother died. I'm just done with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. That's never, it's never good to do that. No, it's not. Just no.
Performance of the week or performer of the week, either one there, Doug.
Performer. We didn't really get to talk about her other than me, slyly mentioning it. I'm not sure how sly I was about it, but
Oh,
Mercedes
you're
Monet.
sly, my friend.
As always, I am, and now I cannot bet against. I can now, I guess, bet against the boss because the boss isn't the boss anymore. She is now the
She's the
CEO,
CEO.
which I'm seeing as a straight up call out to Brett Baker, DMD. So I can't wait for that. But
Maybe
Mercedes
also a
Monet,
little dig, you think, at the reason she left WWE to begin with? Do you think there's a dig in there too with that
CEO.
CEO?
Although I gotta say, she can have a better song, but whatever. I like the old one, but
It's going to take
Mercedes,
it's going to take some getting used to not call her the boss. But I'm with
I
you.
don't,
That's my performer of the week as well. I mean, it was one of those worst kept secrets in wrestling that we all knew it was not
yes,
if, but just when.
when,
And then
uh-huh,
we pretty much knew the when too before it happened.
right.
None of that diminished at all in my mind. The effect of seeing Mercedes Monet in a professional wrestling ring on the biggest stage again, the American stage, on what is going to be a weekly basis. How can you not? I mean, she's a generational talent, one of the best
Absolutely.
of her era, and now she's still young enough that there's a lot in the tank that she's going
Hmm.
to be back on our screens providing all these moments, and I just can't wait to see where it goes. Definitely my
Absolutely.
performer of the week as well.
Absolutely. Let's see if we're in lockstep with the next one.
If we're not, I'm going to come over there and slap you with a shillelagh.
Well, I happened to catch a really great match last night, Kevin.
Dear Lord, Doug. I mean, how could it not be,
Oh,
man?
how could it not be? I mean, and to think these two dudes, both of them, their wrestling careers were legitimately over. And if you're not on board with what me and Kevin are going for here, Shibata, and I almost called him Shibata, that's a bread. Shibata and Brian Danielson, Daniel Bryan. I
Brian
still get it.
Danielson.
Yes, gosh, it's still so interchangeable. But I mean, my goodness, my
But
goodness.
between Candace and Mercedes Monet, I was all ready for an all-female edition of the Big Finish here because I really love that Becky Lynch Liv Morgan match on Raw. And all week long, I'm like, man, that was such a good match. It told a good story. And then last night,
And
a
then
match that I somehow didn't even know was happening. I'm like, did they announce this in advance and I just
what
missed it? Or
that's the thing. You could almost call that a botch. What are you doing? That is a premium live event match. That's like Hogan Goldberg, like on a random Thursday night Thunder. You know,
except it's never random with Brian Danielson anymore. He's on this farewell tour that has just been a total gift for fans. I was talking about this to my wife last night. I'm like, he is on his way to retirement, and he is just basically throwing out whatever dream opponents he's wanted to have and having these
yes.
random matches on a Friday night or a Saturday night, or not pay-per-view matches. I mean, the Osprey match obviously is going to be fantastic. But how many
Mhm.
times since Brian Danielson started this story of retirement has Brian Danielson been a part of our match of the week?
Right?
Multiple times now. I mean, multiple times now. I would dare say that in the 4 years we've done this show, Brian Danielson has not only been part of more of our matches of the week. I'd say whoever is
Mhm.
number 2 on that list is probably a good 10
Oh, I'm
or more
sure.
matches behind.
Yeah. I
How
mean,
is this man nearing retirement in his 40s with all the injuries he had still the best technical wrestler in the world?
talk about your generational talent. Here is another one. I mean, there's an embarrassment of riches in AEW. I mean, WWE is the biggest game in town, no doubt about it. Love AEW, but WWE is the biggest game in town. But talent after talent. I mean, it, Kota Ibushi, you know, Brian Danielson. We have Kenny Omega who's out injured. Okada. Yeah, there's just such an embarrassment of riches in
And
W
suddenly
or AEW.
suddenly a women's division that's on fire. I mean, absolutely
Absolutely.
on fire right now
Absolutely.
with as many talented ladies as they have there. So, yeah, I mean, for all of the problems AEW has had, and they've been really public problems, they are far from dead. All the elements are there for them to have a regeneration of interest. And heck, I mean, even Triple H seems to understand that. If the business is healthy, we're all doing well. So
Absolutely.
this
Yeah.
whole war like business is a thing of the past, really. I don't think anyone's
Yes.
overly concerned about that anymore, and we the fans benefit. This is a great time to be a wrestling fan. AEW is stacked right now, and WWE is on fire heading into Mania season.
Absolutely. It's a great time. I love Mania season, and Mania season this year is loving us.
Go watch Shibata versus Brian Danielson.
Yes.
Continue to watch us. As you can see, our schedule is at the bottom of the screen. Next week, Doug and I will return on Facebook Live. If you're watching us live, it's 8 o'clock on Sunday night. We will be talking the WWE Hall of Fame. We have a full class, and that's going to allow us to share our memories, our favorite matches and moments. We want to hear what yours are as well, and whether or not you think these are worthy entrants into the Hall of Fame. That is just the next step on the Two Bros Wrestling Show road to WrestleMania. We hope you take the journey with us.
Oh, nice. Nice. I can't close any better than that. Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.